The first sign of trouble came not from the skies, but from a knock on the door of room 2B in the dusty mathematics wing of the University of Colorado. Xavier Callen had just finished scribbling a matrix transformation on the whiteboard when the knock came, light but rhythmic, like someone unfamiliar with the actual purpose of knocking. He opened the door, expecting a student, maybe even his colleague Mira from down the hall. Instead, something tall and blue stood before him, holding a metal briefcase in one hand and a slim data slate in the other. "Professor Callen," the creature asked in near-perfect English. Xavier blinked. Yeah, that's me. I am Professor Nevrak of the Veltri Accord. I've come to issue a formal challenge." Xavier stared, still gripping the marker in his hand. "You're from where?" "The Veltri Accord. Fifth Intergalactic Thought Consortium. We detected your cognitive profile during your academic presentation on recursive prime matrices. It was unexpected. We would like to test the integrity of your computational ability." Xavier slowly stepped back, letting the alien enter. Nevrak ducked under the doorway and moved with the grace of someone who had spent a century in zero gravity. His skin shimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights. The slate in his hand glowed a pale green. "You're telling me you came across space to give me a math test?" "No, a duel, intellectual of course. Our supercomputers will be your benchmark. You may use any tool available to your species." Xavier looked down at the pencil in his shirt pocket. "I assume that includes this." Nevrak dipped his head once, solemn. "That is acceptable." The next hour passed in a blur of logistics and caffeine. Nevrak contacted his ship, which hovered somewhere in low orbit, to bring down what he called a computational verification unit, a black trapezoidal monolith that was carried into the room by a floating drone. Students gathered outside the windows, whispering and filming with their phones. Xavier sat down at his desk, a yellow legal pad in front of him, and his familiar mechanical pencil in hand. He hadn't used an actual computer for math since graduate school. He just trusted the feel of graphite on paper more. "The challenge will consist of 10 progressive tasks," Nevrak said, standing beside the monolith. "You may begin when ready." The first problem appeared on the screen, a complicated polynomial identity that took Xavier 10 seconds to read and 5 more to solve. He didn't even write anything down. Nevrak blinked. "You may write your process." "I didn't need to. That one's just a disguised binomial expansion with a factorial twist. You can test it." The monolith hummed and displayed a green checkmark. Nevrak tilted his head, then input the next challenge. This one involved an 11-dimensional tensor transformation. Xavier cracked his knuckles and began writing. "Did you develop your technique independently?" Nevrak asked as Xavier filled the page. "Yeah, I did a lot of mental math as a kid. I used to compete in high school. Didn't have a calculator on me most of the time." Nevrak watched intently. "You are not using memory assistance. No implants." Xavier looked up. "Nope, just caffeine and a lot of insomnia." The next 4 problems came faster. A recursive matrix sequence, a non-linear optimization, a number theory proof involving a conjecture Xavier had once thought about tackling for his doctorate. He wasn't fast because he was guessing he was fast because he understood the structure behind the structure. He saw patterns where others saw chaos. Nevrak's hands twitched slightly after the 6th challenge. "You are now ahead of the computational unit." Xavier raised an eyebrow. "You mean I'm faster?" "Yes, and more energy efficient." "The unit is heating." By the 8th challenge, a whisper spread through the university. Xavier Callen, the quiet professor with the worn-out sneakers and half-buttoned shirt, was outperforming a Veltri-grade computing node. The students outside were now joined by reporter and a few people from the physics department who looked like they'd seen a ghost. The 9th challenge was a simulation of multi-variable chaos in a gravitational field with 7 bodies. Xavier took a deep breath and started sketching a diagram, his pencil moving in tight, intense lines. He lost track of time. When he looked up, Nevrak was staring at him. "You completed it before the node." "Wasn't easy," Xavier muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "Had to approximate the convergence rate manually." "You did not approximate. You synthesized a new heuristic." Xavier shrugged. "Guess it worked." The 10th and final problem appeared. Nevrak paused before uploading it. This challenge has not been solved. It is used to benchmark theoretical capacity. You will not be penalized for failing. Xavier nodded. Then he looked at the problem. It wasn't just math. It was an abstract logic construct wrapped in a numerical paradox. It bent the rules of proof itself. Xavier stared at it for 5 minutes, unmoving. Then he slowly picked up his pencil and began, not solving, reframing, rewriting the assumptions. He didn't try to brute force it. He asked what the problem was trying to hide. When he finished, he placed the pad down and leaned back. There. That's your answer. Nevrak looked at the slate. The screen blinked, then blinked again. The monolith began to emit a low hum. What's wrong? Xavier asked. The problem was designed without a solution. It was a conceptual limit test. Your response created a valid alternate framing that bypassed the paradox without breaking the logical structure. So, I solved the unsolvable? No, Nevrak said slowly. You invalidated the need for a solution. That is more concerning. Students erupted into cheers outside. Xavier ignored them. His hand ached from the writing. His back was sore, and he was hungry. Nevrak turned to him. This will have consequences. Your demonstration will force a reevaluation of cognitive limits across at least 11 cultures. Well, I didn't mean to shake up the galaxy, Xavier said, stretching. I just like puzzles. Nevrak looked at him for a long time. We would like to study you further. In a controlled environment. Xavier frowned. You mean, take me? No, invite, but I will be honest, some factions will insist on observing you. Others may attempt to replicate your methods using less ethical means. So I'm a target now. Yes, Xavier sighed. Then I guess I'd better get some rest. I'm going to need it. He turned to the board and began erasing it slowly, thinking. Behind him, Nevrak stood still, not moving. Later that night, as Xavier sat alone in his office, eating a cold sandwich and massaging his wrist, Nevrak returned. We have a proposal. I'm listening. Our people would like to sponsor you as a guest researcher on Veltrin Prime, full academic autonomy, protection. Xavier looked up. And in return, you will help us understand how your mind works. Xavier considered it. He had students, a quiet life. But he also had curiosity, and apparently some very interested interstellar observers. I'll need time to think. Nevrak nodded. You have 48 hours. After that, the offer is considered withdrawn. Others may reach you before we can. With that, he left. Xavier sat in silence. He opened the pad, looked at the 10th problem again, then tore it off and burned it in the small metal wastebasket by the door. He didn't want anyone else solving that one. Not yet. Tomorrow, he'd talk to the dean. He had a lot of explaining to do. The maintenance lights flickered overhead as Xavier sat on the end of the examination table, his shirt folded neatly on a nearby stool, a disposable blood pressure cuff tightening around his upper arm with a low hiss. The university's medical center had been empty when he arrived, unsurprising, given it was just past 4 in the morning, but now the room buzzed with cautious energy and the quiet hum of portable diagnostic tools. Across from him, a woman in a crisp navy jumpsuit studied a handheld scanner, her expression unreadable. Her ID badge read Dr. Lynn Saavedra, Aerospace Medicine. You're not from Campus Health, Xavier said, watching her run a probe over his forearm. No, she replied. You flagged about 6 different interagency alerts when you outperformed a Tier 7 Veltri computational unit. You're being evaluated under the trans-species cognitive interface protocols. Well, that's a mouthful. It's the quiet version of a red alert, she said. Tilt your head back, he did. She flicked a penlight across his retinas, watching for the response. Any headaches, blurred vision? Only when I try remembering where I left my keys, Xavier muttered. But no, I feel fine. She didn't smile. Fine doesn't mean normal. Your neural scans are showing non-standard synchronization across hemispheres, and your glucose levels dropped 25% over the last 2 hours. That's not sustainable. It was a long day. No one burns through that much glycogen solving math problems. Not unless they're having a seizure or running a marathon in their cerebellum. Xavier lowered his chin. So what's the diagnosis? Am I broken or just inconvenient? Saavedra stepped back, setting down the scanner. Neither, but your body's compensating in ways we don't fully understand. If you'd kept going another hour, you'd be in hypoglycemic shock. Your brain's drawing energy like it's under threat. Maybe it was, he said. I mean, I was being tested by aliens. Your vitals started spiking before the test began. You weren't reacting to stress. You were prepping for it. He looked at her then, more curious than concerned. So what does that mean? Savadra tapped a tablet. It means whatever's happening in your head, it's not a fluke. You've been like this a while. We're just the first to notice. Before he could respond, the ceiling panels rattled as a low vibration rolled through the building. Savadra froze. That's not local, she said, eyes narrowing. Seconds later, the hallway outside filled with the sound of boots and something heavier like metal dragging across tile. The door opened before either of them moved. A creature ducked into the room, taller than Nevrak, with segmented limbs and a face like a sculpted mask of obsidian. Two smaller figures flanked it, their torsos covered in iridescent armor that shimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights. You are the human-designated Xavier Callen, the tall one said without preamble. Savadra placed herself between them. This is a restricted medical evaluation. You weren't cleared for entry. We do not require clearance, it replied. We require access. Xavier slid off the table, still shirtless. Can we at least try introductions before the abduction starts? The tall figure inclined its head. We are the Karth Dominion's Academic Oversight Corps. You are now a subject of diplomatic interest. Diplomatic interest usually comes with a handshake, not an escort team, Xavier said. The left flank stepped forward and extended a four-fingered hand, palm up. This is the gesture. Accept it or decline, but be aware declining marks you as a guarded entity. We are not known for patience. Savadra's fingers hovered near her communicator, but Xavier shook his head. It's fine. He took the hand. The moment their skin touched well, his skin and whatever thermally regulated surface they used, his vision blurred at the edges. Not painfully, more like a sudden recalibration. As if the colors in the room shifted slightly toward infrared and then snapped back, the Karth released him. We have registered your consent, it said. You will not be extracted, you will be escorted. To where? To the location where your anomaly can be properly contextualized. Savadra stepped forward. He's not going anywhere without medical clearance. The tall Karth turned to her. Your assessments are based on terrestrial metrics. They are insufficient. You are welcome to accompany him, provided you do not interfere. Xavier pulled on his shirt slowly, wincing as the fabric stuck to his damp skin. How long will this take? Until the pattern is understood. That's not an answer. It is the only one we are authorized to give. Savadra glanced at him. You don't have to go. He looked at the three Karth. They didn't say I had to. They just made it clear what happens if I don't. 10 minutes later, they were outside under a sky beginning to pale with dawn. A narrow vessel hovered in the empty quad, its surface dull and ridged like compressed volcanic glass. No markings, no windows. Just a silent open ramp and a faint smell of ozone. Inside, the air was dry and faintly metallic. One of the escorts gestured toward a recessed bench lined with a ribbed cushion. Xavier sat. Savadra remained standing, the ship lifted without a sound. Where are we going? He asked. The lead Karth sat across from him, folding its limbs in what passed for repose. A neutral orbit station, Veltri Accord jurisdiction. Does Nevrak know? He is the one who filed the transfer request. Xavier leaned back, eyes half closed. Of course he did. They docked within 15 minutes. The station resembled a massive coil, each segment rotating at different speeds. The interior was cleaner than Xavier expected, no sci-fi grime or flickering panels. Just long, white corridors and walls that shimmered faintly when you looked too long. They were led to a chamber that looked like a cross between a planetarium and a courtroom. In the center, a concave platform surrounded a low railing. Around the perimeter sat a dozen beings, some humanoid, others distinctly not, each seated in individual alcoves beneath a canopy of moving light. A voice echoed from the ceiling, layered and shifting. Subject Xavier Callen. You have demonstrated an anomalous cognitive structure. This hearing is to determine the nature of your deviation and whether it constitutes a galactic risk. Deviant, Xavier said. I did math. You reframed a paradox. You demonstrated heuristic synthesis beyond expected parameters. We have not observed this adaptation in over 900 years. Savadra folded her arms. Are you saying he's dangerous? Not by intention, but by implication. He may represent a recursive evolution of human cognition, one we failed to anticipate. Xavier stepped forward. I'm just a guy with a pencil. I didn't evolve anything. Another figure, gelatinous and transparent, floated closer. Yet you operate using analog tools to produce non-analog results. Your species is not authorized for this. Explain. Xavier ran a hand through his hair. I didn't know authorization was required to think. It is not. But what you think about is now our concern. The room dimmed. A projection appeared above him, his own neural scan, overlaid with a cascade of shifting symbols. You are forming predictive feedback loops between conscious and subconscious processors. That is not native to your kind. When did this begin? I don't know, he said. Maybe when I stopped sleeping properly. The projection pulsed. You are not merely solving problems, you are predicting them. Your brain is modeling challenge structures before they are presented. Savadra stared. He's anticipating the test before it's written. The Karth representative nodded once. That's not a gift, Xavier muttered. That's why I haven't had a full night's sleep in 3 years. The chamber fell quiet. Finally, the voice returned. This capability is not inherently hostile, but it is disruptive. You will remain under monitoring until we determine the extent of its spread. Savadra stepped forward. And what happens if others start showing similar patterns? Then humanity will be reclassified. Xavier looked up. As what? An emergent cognitive species. And if that's not something we want, the room dimmed further. Then you will be observed until you do. He sat back against the railing, eyes closed briefly. He had a feeling he wouldn't be going home for a while. Xavier squinted against the pale light filtering through the wall panels of his new environment. The chamber had no corners. Every edge curved into the next, giving it the unsettling feel of a structure grown rather than built. A faint hum pulsed in the background, not mechanical, but more like something alive and breathing beneath the floor. He sat on a flat, low platform that adjusted itself beneath him without prompting, while a translucent surface in front of him displayed shifting geometric patterns he hadn't asked to see. You're calibrating again, he said to no one. A spherical drone hovered into view, its surface a smooth gradient of muted copper and green. It paused mid-air, then gently descended until it floated eye level. A narrow slit along its front pulsed once. You are metabolically stable. Neural activity remains elevated but within tolerable deviation, the drone said. You keep saying tolerable like that's meant to be comforting. We do not perform comfort, only observation. Yeah, I noticed. He stood up and stretched, grimacing at the stiffness in his shoulders. The drone tracked his movements silently, muscle rigidity. Consistent with prolonged cognitive overuse, you have not initiated voluntary sleep since arrival. I don't sleep well under surveillance. Sleep integrity is not within our mandate. A low chime interrupted them. A new figure entered angular, cloaked in layered fabric that shifted colors with every step. Its face was a cascade of vertical slits that moved as it spoke. You are requested in the Comparative Cognition Lab for an integration trial. Requested or required? Xavier asked. The distinction is irrelevant. I'll take that as required. He followed the figure through a corridor that brightened ahead and dimmed behind, footsteps echoing faintly. They passed a chamber where several species sat around a table, one with a body like a cluster of vines, another that resembled a stack of breathing stones. No one looked up. Inside the lab, Nevrak waited. He stood beside a transparent structure shaped like an egg, open at one end. The surface shimmered like rippling water, even though it was solid. You will enter the resonance frame, Nevrak said. It will record your live problem-solving pathways. Xavier eyed the egg. Will it fry my brain? No. But if your thought process destabilizes, the frame will self-neutralize. Neutralize as in shut off, or neutralize as in non-lethal disengagement. That's not exactly a glowing endorsement. Nevrak stepped aside. You may decline. However, the data obtained may prevent future misclassification of your species. Xavier climbed in. The surface felt soft at first, then firmed under his weight. A pulse passed through his spine, not painful but immediate. A lattice of light formed above him, shifting in concert with his breathing. "Present a problem," Nevrak said. The walls around the frame darkened. A projection formed above, a rotational system with 3 nested axes, each with independent torque and variable gravitational resistance. Xavier tilted his head. "Is this a physics test disguised as a math problem or the other way around?" "Both." He closed his eyes, letting the visual settle behind his eyelids. The trick he'd learned wasn't to solve each layer individually. It was seeing how they constrained each other. He began tracing imaginary arcs with his fingers, ignoring the drone that had reappeared to monitor his vitals. "The third axis can't remain stable unless the second is tethered to a harmonic sequence," he muttered. "You can't brute force that. You need resonance." He opened his eyes and tapped the air, feeding his solution back into the projection. The system responded, stabilizing momentarily before collapsing under its own simulated mass. Xavier smiled faintly, close but not quite. Nevrak stepped forward. "You did not complete it." "No, I showed why it fails. That's the point. It's not a solvable system under the given constraints. You need to redefine the boundary conditions." The projection flickered, then reset. From the side of the room, a new voice emerged. It came from a being shaped like a tapering spiral, with no discernible eyes or mouth. "You are rejecting the premise of the test." "I'm correcting it," Xavier replied. "You're asking the wrong question." A pause followed, then the spiral being rotated slowly. "Most subjects attempt to comply with the test's architecture. You restructure it. Because the architecture's flawed. You're measuring intelligence like it's a static thing. It's not. It's adaptive, contextual." Nevrak's head tilted slightly. "You are suggesting intelligence is reflexive. I'm saying it's not about speed or memory. It's about when you decide the rules don't make sense anymore and what you do next." The lights in the room dimmed for a full 3 seconds, then brightened again. "You may exit the frame," Nevrak said. Xavier stepped out. His legs felt heavier than before, not weak, just dense. "How long was I in there?" 17 minutes. He looked at the clock on the wall. "Felt longer." "Your temporal processing rate increased." The drone circled him again. "Hydration levels are low, cortisol elevated. You require replenishment. Wouldn't say no to coffee. We do not serve stimulants, figures." Nevrak gestured to a side panel, which opened to reveal a seat and a tray of nutrient blocks. Xavier picked one up, sniffed it, and bit without enthusiasm. "Tastes like drywall." "That is not among the intended outcomes," he chewed and swallowed. "So what now? More tests? Or do I get a certificate and a pat on the back?" Nevrak paused. "There will be no further testing." "No. You have demonstrated a pattern of cognition that is not replicable by simulation. Your methods are internally consistent but externally opaque. Attempts to reproduce your outcomes using synthetic models produced recursive instability. In English, you broke the simulation trying to copy your brain. Neat." Nevrak gestured again, and the wall behind him retracted to reveal a screen. It showed Earth, rotating slowly above a layer of silver clouds. "You are cleared to return. A transit vessel is ready." Xavier frowned. "That's it. There is no further benefit in continued observation. You are not transmissible. Your anomaly is not viral. It is emergent and isolated." He looked at the spiral creature. "So I'm not a threat." "You are an exception," it replied. "Exceptions do not threaten systems, they reveal them." Xavier turned back to Nevrak. "So what do I tell the people back home?" "Tell them nothing. That'll go over well. You may tell them you passed a test. You need not specify who administered it." He sighed. "You ever have one of those weeks where you accidentally stumble into interstellar relevance, and all you wanted was to teach your Tuesday class?" Nevrak did not respond. Xavier followed the drone back through the curving corridors to the docking bay. The vessel waiting for him was smaller than the one that had brought him. Sleek, no markings, no windows, just a single ramp extended in silence. He turned once before stepping aboard. "Tell the others," he said. "You're looking in the wrong place. Intelligence isn't just in the answers. It's in the questions people are stubborn enough to ask." Nevrak inclined his head. The ramp closed behind him. 3 hours later, he was back in Boulder. The The sky was overcast. The air smelled like wet pavement. He walked across the quad toward the familiar brick of the mathematics wing. A student passed him, earbuds in, oblivious. Inside his office, nothing had changed. His pencil lay on the desk where he'd left it. The whiteboard was still half covered in symbols. He sat down, exhaled, and picked up the pencil. Then, with deliberate motion, he erased everything on the board. He had new questions now, and no one left watching but himself.